Essay 7. Eastern Buddhism incorporates seemingly opposing views of life that in modern Western secular society pose a practical contradiction, namely, power from without versus power from within, page 126. This latter view certainly involves the practice of meditation but not prayer, a practice invoking an external deity. In order to explain what he means by the idea of a power, Campbell once again uses in this essay the analogy of the multitude of light bulbs illuminating the lecture hall he is using for his talk. Each bulb is separate from the others, and we may think of them accordingly as separate from each other. Regarded that way, they are so many empirical facts, and the whole universe seen that way is called in Japanese, Ji-Hokai, the universe of things. Each of these separate bulbs is a vehicle of light, and the light is not many, but one. The one light, that is to say, is being displayed through all these bulbs, and we may think, therefore, either of the many bulbs or of the one light. Moreover, if this or that bulb went out, it would be replaced with another, and we should again have the same light. The light, which is one, appears thus through many bulbs. So each of us below is a vehicle of consciousness. But the important thing about a bulb is the quality of its light. Likewise, the important thing about each of us is the quality of his consciousness. And although each may identify himself mainly with his separate body and its frailties, it is also possible to regard one's body as a mere vehicle of consciousness, and to think then of consciousness as the one presence here made manifest through us all. There are but two ways of interpreting and experiencing the same set of present facts. One way is not truer than another. Page 128. Campbell, in the context of this discussion, invokes the Indian proclamation "Thou art that," arguing that designates all consciousness, all bliss, all being. It is not easy, however, to shift the accent of one's sense of being from the body to its consciousness, and from this consciousness, then, to consciousness altogether. Page 129. The important reference in the above passage is to one sense of being, which Heidegger captured so aptly in his formulation "being in the world," a formulation which seeks to transcend the opposites of within and without. In modern Western philosophy, from Aristotle to Freud, and further to O'Shaughnessy, consciousness is seen as a vicissitude of human psyche, of human life, and this sense of life is incorporated into the larger sense of consciousness, which in turn has its vicissitudes, all charted very precisely by Aristotelian hylomorphic theory, the many meanings of being, and Kantian critical theory, in the distinction between the phenomenal and the noumenal. The modern idea of the will, inherited from Kantian philosophy, designates both the impulsive urge to act and the more complex striving toward leading the life of eudaimonia. This technical term is connected for Kant to the idea of the good, and the good will then becomes the absolute of the Kantian ethical system. This account of ethics was an elaboration upon Aristotelian ethics which could be applied in the modern political realm in the form of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that, in turn, could be administered by Kantian-inspired international institutions, namely, the United Nations and the International Court of Justice. Kant's duty-based ethics situates the ethical agent in the realm of being, a realm Kant designated as the noumenal realm which we can think about, but we can have no knowledge about, since the sensible power of intuition has no direct or indirect contact with such a realm. Kant's aesthetic form of consciousness was the issue raised in the previous essay, and was there characterized as a feeling of life that is one important aspect of the universal form of consciousness Campbell refers to. The ethical form of consciousness is another important aspect, and it involves the powers of perception, imagination, and judgment, but both perception and the imagination have different roles to that which they have in aesthetic contexts, owing to the primary importance of the powers of understanding and practical reasoning. The religious form of consciousness is yet another aspect with connections to both aesthetic and ethical forms, but for Kant, this form has importance only within the bounds of reason. This aspect requires forms of thought that are not primarily related to the imagination and its connection to imagining the occurrence of supernatural events. Clearly, the transcendental notion of the I think is of crucial importance for the Kantian account that, although is hylomorphic in intent, is, however, less concerned with the instinctive aspect of our nature and more concerned with those human higher mental processes that we find in the faculties of the understanding and reason. Instinctive rituals such as prayer are of less significance for human being in the world than are the cognitive and aesthetic processes relating to the Aristotelian proclamation The Many Meanings of Being and the Kantian proclamation Dare to Use Your Reason. Using one's reason, of course, entails using the principles of non-contradiction and sufficient reason. Understanding and reason are higher vicissitudes of consciousness, and as such are regulated by different principles that in turn explain for us the nature of these vicissitudes. Campbell cites the Keni Upanishad. There the eye goes not, speech goes not, nor the mind. Other it is than the known, and moreover above the unknown. For on coming back between two thoughts one would find that all words, which of course can only be of thoughts and things, names and forms, only mislead. Page 129. Now being itself cannot be known in either Aristotelian or Kantian metaphysics. It is rather a condition of knowing, yet it does appear on both accounts as if we can think about the realm of being. Kant's I think is a transcendental power lying beyond the phenomenal realm of objects and their relationships, the Chinese-Japanese realm of 10,000 things. The faculty of reason, insofar as Kantian critical philosophy is concerned, aims to provide us with the totality of conditions involved in the experiencing of phenomena of various kinds, and given this holistic aim, is a higher vicissitude of consciousness. Campbell himself would perhaps not sanction this form of argumentation in spite of himself appealing to Kant's transcendental account of analogy, which provided us with some thought content insofar as the idea of God was concerned. Indeed, Campbell's argument in the context of this discussion relies on experience rather than any of the higher aesthetic or cognitive processes. He claims, further, that unless one has had the experience one is attempting to communicate, the attempt at communication will fail and the interlocutor will not be able to understand what is being said. Campbell elaborates upon this with the claim, thoughts and definitions may annul one's experiences even before they are taken in. Page 129. This point is developed further and reference is made to the net of our concepts which, it is argued, fails to capture the meanings of being. This, it ought to be emphasized, was not Aristotle's position, a position that sought for principles, laws, that is itself an important necessary condition for understanding the network of ancient Greek concepts, e.g. arete, episteme, dike, psyche, phronesis, eudaimonia, etc. One of Aristotle's lasting achievements, indeed, was his essence-specifying definition of human psyche, namely rational animal capable of discourse. Campbell argues that the net of concepts must be broken in the name of Zen, which calls for the abandonment of the ego. The ego that attempts to capture the meanings of being via the use of names, categories, meanings which cannot, according to his position, reach the realm of being Zen has attained. Buddha, Campbell claims, aimed to break the net and succeeded in doing so, thus finding the midpoint of the universe that Eliot described in his work Four Quartets as the still point of the turning world. The tree of enlightenment that Buddha rested beneath was at this still point. Whilst meditating beneath this tree, the myth claims, the god whose name is both desire and death, tempted Buddha with his 3 beautiful daughters. Buddha, it was claimed, was unmoved. The god then transformed itself into death and unleashed a terrible army whose purpose it was to destroy Buddha, but again he sat unmoved. In a final attempt to move Buddha, the god transformed itself into the lord of Dharma, duty, appealing to Buddha's sense of responsibility toward his own people, also without effect. This is an interesting Kantian moment in the myth which certainly raises questions relating to why Buddha remained unmoved by such an appeal to the rights of Buddha's people. It is a familiar argument in the realm of political philosophy that a human right does not exist unless there is someone in authority to recognize such a right. Surely, it can be argued, that Buddha's people had a right to their ruler treating them as ends in themselves, in accordance with the categorical imperative of a moral law, which originated from a power within. The myth continues with Buddha experiencing a terrible storm and being protected by a serpent from Mother Earth. He then arrives at another surprising judgment touching upon the fate of all mankind, namely, that enlightenment cannot be taught, page 132. Yet in spite of this proclamation, Buddha continues his teaching by referring to a fundamental truth which the Greeks and many philosophers after them understood all too well, namely that all life is sorrowful. His teaching continues with the assertion that there is a release from this sorrowful condition, namely the experience of nirvana or what Campbell calls bliss. With this transcendental experience, the ego, it is argued, is extinguished. It is also claimed that neither the life of the monk nor the life of the prince are preferential forms of life if one aims to extinguish the desires of the ego without shrinking the light of life to a mere pinpoint. Rather, many different forms of life, e.g. merchants, monks, princes, and even insects can adopt the role of a merciful teacher immediately prior to the extinguishing moment of enlightenment. Campbell also refers to a vision of the universe from the Orient which, it can be argued, resembles to some extent the view some philosophers of ancient Greece proposed. The universe is a great spread-out net WTH at every joint, a gem, and each gem not only reflecting all the others but itself reflected in all, a great number of things round about, on every side, are causing what is happening now. Everything all the time is causing everything else. Page 144. This resembles a concrete image that could represent the spirit of Aristotle's more abstract theory of change, in which Aristotle attempts to capture the elusive many meanings of being via three principles of change, four kinds of change, three media of change, space, time, matter, and four causes of change, all present in the multitude of sciences Aristotle categorized into the theoretical sciences, the practical sciences, and the productive sciences. All men desire to know, Aristotle, metaphysics, is the aim of all the sciences, but the modes of knowledge involved is different in the different sciences because the principles differ. The question why is thus connected to the facts in the different sciences, and the answer to this question provides us with explanations which are in accordance with the principles of non-contradiction and sufficient reason. The appeals to arch, aletheia, logos, and episteme are involved in the contexts of explanation and justification that can be found in the theoretical sciences. The overall aim of the theoretical sciences is to provide us with the truth, and this contrasts with the overall aim in the practical sciences, which is to provide us with an idea of the good in various practical contexts. The Buddhist doctrine that all life is sorrowful echoes the ancient Greek oracular proclamation that everything created by man is destined for ruin and destruction, which in itself is a sorrowful state of affairs that in turn throws considerable light upon the Freudian ego, defined as a precipitate of lost objects. Freud, we know, proclaimed that suffering was the greatest educator in life, and this correlates too with the Kantian characterization of the social life of his period in terms of the melancholically haphazard. Campbell also fixates upon the emphasis upon contemplation by Buddha, and this recalls the Aristotelian recommendation that we lead a life of contemplation if we wish to experience the good-spirited flourishing life, eudaimonia.